Kafka is a lightning element nihility character with a heavy emphasis on damage over time effects, also known as DoTs. As a DoT-based character, one of the biggest benefits you're going to enjoy is the fact that they don't actually need to build crit because DoTs can't crit. And if you're already invested in damage over time effects, then Kafka is going to be an absolute must pickup for you because she's kind of like the queen of DoTs. But if you've only been interested but not yet invested, now is the perfect time because Kafka's 1.2 banner, yeah, it's kind of stacked for her. Good news is any future DoT-based characters are only going to make her better and she's going to make them better. And boasting a kit that has follow-ups, dots, and attack scaling, she's a natural fit for the simulated universe. Kafka is a little bit of a generalist and does neither amazing single target or AoE DPS, but that can also be a good thing. You also need to be wary of the fact that she really needs to be with other damage over time characters. As with most characters that carry the team, she is a little skill point hungry. You also can't expect her to just enter a battle and just mop the floor with all the enemies immediately. Damage over time takes a little bit of time to ramp up. Once it gets going though, it is a very strong source of damage that really is only going to get better with time with a character like Kafka in the game. Now let's cover her basic kit so you understand how she works. Her technique is a rather simple one. You do an AoE attack which looks extremely good. It does a little bit of damage and has a 100% base chance to apply the same shock that her ultimate applies to every enemy for 2 turns. It's a very nice way to start a battle for a character that really needs dots to ramp up. Kafka's talent is also going to help up with ramping the dots quickly. When an ally does a basic attack to an enemy, Kafka is going to do a follow-up attack on that target and have a 100% base chance to apply a shock to that target. And once again, just like the technique, this is going to be equivalent to the shock that her ultimate would apply. And this effect can also only be triggered once per turn. Now, while the damage from this follow-up attack is not anything impressive on its own, again, it's all about applying the shock. Now, of course, you can buff the damage of this follow-up with something like buffs from the simulated universe, but it's more just, some nice extra damage, and the fact that it does count as a follow-up is very nice once again for something like SU, but maybe in the future we'll also get some actual mechanics outside of there that really encourage you to do follow-ups as well, and this is going to make Kafka even better. Now we have Kafka's skill. This is where things get a little bit interesting. For the most part, this is almost going to be like a standard issue erudition based AoE attack, except for the second half of its description. This is what makes Kafka special. Kafka, from not only her ultimate, as we'll get to in a little bit, but her skill also triggers every dot on the enemy target, whether it's hers or not. The dots that are triggered this way, they may do reduced damage, but trust me, when you really stack dots up on an enemy target, this skill is going to hurt. Just for the sake of covering everything, Kafka does have a basic attack. That is a fact that nobody can deny, but nothing in her kit has any interactions with the basic attack, so you pretty much always want to be using your skill, so moving on. Her ultimate, on the other hand, is nothing to gloss over. This is an amazing ability. Not only is this going to be the shock that most of your abilities that apply your shocks are scaling off of, but this too, just like your skill, triggers enemy dots. Now it's worth noting that that is not a base functionality of Kafka's ultimate. You need a bonus trace to actually trigger the ability to trigger other dots other than a shock. With the help of this bonus trace, Kafka's ultimate becomes a weapon of mass destruction. This thing, it's going to do massive amounts of AoE damage, and even more the longer the fight goes on, the more dots you stack up on enemy targets. Not to mention it has another benefit over the skill that it actually does more damage than the skill does when it triggers those dots as well. Traces. Kafka was blessed with a lot of attack nodes, which is fantastic because that's the main stat she's going to be stacking to scale her damage. You'll also be getting 3 minor effect hit rate traces, which is amazing because without effect hit rate, dot-based characters kind of fall flat on their faces. If you can't apply your dots, you can't do your damage. You'll also find 2 HP traces here. Now, you don't need to get them because they're not blocking anything, but if you need help in the survivability department, these might help you out just a little bit, but otherwise, you only need to get them when you feel like you need them. We already covered Kafka's first bonus trace, Torture, when we covered her ultimate earlier, and this is the most important trace you can get, allowing her to trigger more dots easily. Plunder isn't a trace that's really going to wow anybody, but extra energy regeneration on a unit where their ultimate is so crucial to their overall goal, it is still a nice trace. Thorns, on the other hand, is crucial to her build. This is free effect hit rate and in a massive quantity. So with this and her minor traces, she is not going to need nearly as much as most other characters who also need this stat. For 4-piece relic sets, Kafka has 2 main options that I would consider, with Band of Sizzling Thunder activating on skill use and giving attack and lightning damage. This is basically everything Kafka wants. Her skill is going to be used constantly, triggering this effect basically every time she takes a turn. And with attack and lightning damage being 2 of her main damage building stats, this really is perfect for her. However, if you don't want to farm that domain or you just happen to have good musketeer pieces, this is always an option too. No, it's not going to give you nearly as many offensive stats, and the basic attack damage is going to be kind of wasted, but the speed is always nice, and it's free attack without without any conditions. There's always the option of using a 2-piece Musketeers, 2-piece Band of Sizzling Thunder as well. For Planar Relics, many people's instinct may be to go to the effect hit rate set. However, due to Kafka's insane base effect hit rate, I just don't think she's going to build enough effect hit rate on purpose, and with an actual purpose of doing so, to make this set really worth using. The Space Sealing Station set, on the other hand, this works perfectly for Kafka. It's a bunch of extra attack, and the speed bonus isn't even that hard for her to reach. Many of us also likely have relics from this set lying around that just didn't get crit rate that we didn't really see much value in. If you're lucky and you kept some of those, your Kafka's probably going to be able to use them. Otherwise, it's not that bad to have to farm more, but this is a set that I would recommend using. As for the stats you're going to want to aim for, attack body is going to be the way to go. Since crit is not a priority for DoT, it's not going to be a priority in the stats either, but it is a nice little bonus when you can get it in substats. As more Kafka turns means more Kafka triggering DoTs, speed is likely going to be a priority for the boots. However, as I always like to say, let your substats guide you. If your only pair of speed boots is absolutely terrible, but your attack percent boots are amazing, they just might be worth using over the speed. Lightning damage bonus will of course be the Planar Sphere stat of choice, as it does still affect damage over time effects. Link rope will either be attack percent or energy regen, whichever one you happen to have better substats for, much like the boots, would be the one I ultimately recommend you pursuing. As for substats, when attack percent is not the main stat on the piece of gear, attack percent is going to be extremely high priority. Speed will be another high priority stat, but one thing I think you should worry about is where Kafka's speed is in relation to your other DoT-based characters on the team. After all, ideally, they would be a little bit faster than Kafka, that way they go before her, they can apply her dots, stack them up, and then Kafka can trigger them for bonus damage. Break effect can be potentially nice, but the only problem I have with it is in a DoT-based team where there is a lot of elemental damage going around and a lot of bouncing effects potentially, it's really hard to guarantee who's going to be doing the break. Effect hit rate would normally be a very high priority stat on a DoT-based character such as Kafka, but because they were so generous with how much she has as a base chance, I really don't think she's going to need very much. At most, you may need 10 to 20% at the current state of the game. The thing is the game is going to be constantly evolving, and who knows what enemies may come down the line with really high resistances. As things are right now, she really doesn't need much extra, if any at all. Crit stats are going to be a nice little bonus for the little flat damage she does do, but it's not going to be a priority. These stat priorities really make Kafka a rather unique and very easy character to build overall. Kafka is going to have access to quite a few light cones, so let's quickly go over some of her better options. It goes without saying, if you can get her signature light cone, it's going to be the best one for her. High base attack, free generic damage percent just for equipping the thing, speed that thanks to her talent is going to stack up real quickly, and it synergizes with her kit overall. But let's go over some more free-to-play friendly options. Good Night and Sleepwell's passive effect is going to cap out extremely easy with the average Kafka team, where they're going to have probably well over 3 debuffs, just giving her a bunch of free damage percent just for nothing. Perhaps you would like to forgo the gacha system and just go with something reliable. In that case, you want to go to the Forgotten Hall shop and buy the Fermata Light Cone. You can get this thing to super in position 5 rather easily, and with that it's going to give you quite a lot of extra damage. The targets are basically always going to be affected by one of these two dots, Shock or Wind Shear, and the break effect is just a nice added bonus. I would try to avoid the light cones that have a high amount of effect hit rate, because you definitely have other units that are going to be in Kafka's team who just value this stat way more than her. Now, what about teammates? Who does Kafka want in her team? So Kafka values a few things. One, she wants other characters that use dots. She also wants other characters that may buff dots, and fortunately for her, Sampo does both of those things. Sampo is not only one of the strongest dot characters we have in the game right now, but he also buffs other characters' dots, which is going to help Kafka. They are going to help each other. So good news for you Sampo lovers, they are going to be a match made in heaven. Bad news for people who don't want to use him, I think you're going to be much worse off if you try to ignore him and use somebody else. That being said, there are other options. While I did say Kafka's a little bit of a generalist damage dealer, neither specializing in AoE or single target, she definitely leans more towards the AoE department. So while you can use someone like Himiko, who does have a little bit of burn in her kit to make her AoE even better, I would personally lean more towards helping out the single target and going with a unit like Luca, who releases alongside Kafka, or a unit like Hook. Both of these are units that not many other teams are going to place a high value on, meaning if you like these units, this is a perfect chance chance to use them in probably the best environment they can be. You can also use units such as Pella and Silverwolf who utilize defense shredding to increase the damage of dots as well. As for healer or shielder options, you really have a pick of anyone you want. None of these units really specialize in dot. Sure, Bailu or Natasha could do their basic attack, break an enemy and trigger a dot, but that is a lot less likely to happen. You can always run a preservation character with the Trend of the Universal Market Light Cone, which does trigger a dot. It's not going to do any amazing damage, but more dots is still more dots. So if you have a Gepard lying around and you've just been waiting for him to do something, well, slap this on him and he's probably going to do pretty well for the team. And that's everything I have. If dot-based gameplay is something that interested you, I highly recommend you pick up Kafka. Her starting banner is the perfect time to break into that playstyle, and Kafka is probably going to be used for a very long time to come. So if you're pulling for Kafka, I wish you the best of luck. I hope you get her quick, and I hope you get some Sampo cons along the way because they really are a fantastic team. So a big thank you to my members, my patrons. As always, thank you to you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Attaboy!